What is up, everybody? BK Voiceover here, and welcome to part 5, our fifth and final part of our off-season scenarios series. Prior to the NFL Combine here next weekend, and prior to free agency starting here on March 15th. So this is going to be the final part of our off-season scenario series for 2023. To give you a quick recap of everything we've done, part 1, we went over the roster as it currently stands now, and we determined what our needs are going to be for this offseason period. Part 2, we went ahead and did some re-signing of our own players. Part 3, we went ahead and did some cap-saving moves, so extensions, restructures, and cuts. And then part 4, most recently, we got 4 players who I want to see be on Seattle's team and make moves that we can fit within our cap limits. Definitely more of a fantasy, but that is totally okay because that is what this is. This is a potential idea that I think could be kind of fun. So, this leads us to our final episode of the series, and we are going to do our first official mock draft 1.0. So, we will go ahead and get started, but before we do, let's do a quick recap of the moves we've made. So, our QB situation, we re-signed Geno Smith to 3 years, $90 million. We don't have a backup. That's something we may have to address in here. Running back, we still had Kenneth Walker and DJ at Dallas. We re-signed Rashad Penny and Godwin Igwebuike to the 90-man roster, as well as signing Tony Jones Jr. since he's an exclusive rights free agent. We signed Marquise Goodwin to a 1-year deal, as well as getting Cody Thompson, signing him to an exclusive rights free agent deal. No changes to our tight end room, no change to our tackle room. For guard, we let Gabe Jackson go, and we brought in Ben Powers, guard from the Ravens. He played primarily left guard, but I think he could do good at right guard as well. Very good at right guard. Damian Lewis will stay as your left guard. Phil Haynes, backup depth. We re-signed Austin Blythe to backup money, and we have Joey Hunt on the roster as it stands. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, we let both Al Woods and Brian Monet go in this scenario, in addition to Quinton Jefferson. And in their place, we went out and signed my favorite defensive lineman in free agency, and that is Deron Payne, as well as some depth at our nose tackle position with Jonathan Hankins. For outside linebacker, no changes there. Inside linebacker, we went out and re-signed Tanner Muse and John Radigan, as well as signing free agent linebacker Drew Tranquill. In the cornerback room, no real changes. We did re-sign Mike Jackson Sr. to a new deal. No changes to our slot corners, and to our safety depth, we re-signed Ryan Neal. So, we did fill a couple of big holes with our signings here. Inside linebacker is going to be a big need, especially with Jordan Brooks probably missing a bit of time at the start of the season. Drew Tranquill is a really good coverage linebacker. Tanner Muse was good in a reserve role, and even played well when he was called upon. So, moving on. These are the needs that I think Seattle is going to have going into the draft in this scenario. Number 1 is center. Austin Blythe will be fine backup depth and provide good, what's the word I'm looking for? Good veteran leadership and helping develop a young center for us. Nose tackle is also a big need. Al Woods was getting up there in age, and Brian Monet injuries and also lack of effectiveness. So nose tackle is going to be a need in this draft. We still need more inside linebacker depth as well, even with the signings we already did, because they're all going to be free agents after the season except for Tranquill. And slot corner. Kobe Bryant was good, but we also need... I think it's a place that we can improve on this team as it stands right now, and he could also hopefully play some additional safety roles as well. So without further ado, we are going to go ahead and get started. So Seattle has 9 picks in this draft. We have 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, a third-rounder, a fourth-rounder, 2 fifth-rounders, and a sixth-round pick. I've heard some rumblings that apparently we have a seventh-rounder because we didn't lose ours when we traded for John Reed, but I'm getting mixed reports on that. So for the time being, we're going to treat this draft as though there are only 9 picks. There will also be no trades in this draft. I never do trades in my first mock draft. So without further ado, we will go ahead and get started. And Seattle's first pick on the board, pick number 5, the Seattle Seahawks select Tyree Wilson, defensive end out of Texas Tech. This has been a very, very popular mock to the Seahawks at pick 5. I'll give you kind of the rundown of what happened in this case. So I kind of lied. In this mock draft that happened, I did do one trade, and that was for the Colts to trade up to the first overall pick and select a quarterback. So Bryce Young went number 1 overall, followed by C.J. Stroud to the Texans, followed by Will Anderson to the Cardinals, and Jalen Carter to the Bears. So with that, I just went best player available in this scenario. In this scenario, we re-signed Geno Smith, so I'm not going to go quarterback. I'm not going to go Anthony Richardson. I'm not going to go Will Levis. I'm going to go with the most physically intimidating player in this entire draft, in my opinion, and that is the bruiser Tyree Wilson. 61 tackles in 2022 to go along with 7 sacks, 14 tackles for loss, and a forced fumble. He has had 2 back-to-back seasons where he had 7+ sacks, so he has the production in his time in college to show off. And my goodness, his physical traits are elite. He's a huge arm length, great wingspan. He at 275, 6'6", he has the ability to put on a bit more weight, maybe move inside full time, but he has that inside-outside flexibility. He's a great pass rusher. He's also one of the best run defenders in this entire draft. Very strong tackler. The one knock on him, of course, at his size, he's not very fast. He's not very twitchy. He's not going to be like your Will Anderson, who has a ton of bend and a ton of speed and a lot of athleticism. He's not going to beat you with speed. He is going to beat you with his great ability at turning speed into strength. Also, a small repertoire of pass rushing moves might be a concern, but that can be taught. And the player comparison that I've seen 2, and I kind of can see both. Comparison, he's like a combination of Montez Sweat and Carlos Dunlap, and I think that's perfect. Very similar frame to what Carlos Dunlap was when he played edge when we ran a 4-3. He has that inside-outside flexibility. He can play outside linebacker. He can also move inside on passing downs. So yeah, I think while it doesn't fill it is a defensive line pick. It does fill a position of need, and honestly, I think it's the best player available at this point. And I think if you're going to succeed in this draft, I think you go ahead and you play it out the exact same way you played out last year. And that is take best player available where you can and fill the holes as you go. Because when you take the best player available, everything else will come. So yeah, Tyree Wilson at pick number 5. Moving on to our next pick at pick 20. We are going from defense over to offense. We are going to be taking wide receiver Jordan Addison out of USC. But BK, why? Our defense was atrocious. We have 2 elite wide receivers on the outside. Why do we need to go out and spend a first-round pick on a wide receiver? And my answer to that is, you want to know what's better than having 2 great wide receivers on the outside? Or just 2 great wide receivers in general? Having 3! Having 3! Take a look at the Bengals. They have 3 great wide receivers, and they're one of the best offenses in the league. Joe Burrow's been great, but lots of teams would be playing great if they had a Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd. So, tell you a little bit about Jordan Addison. 6 foot, 175, 21 years old. He had a fantastic season, not in 2022, but in 2021 when he was at Pittsburgh. He had 1,600 plus scrimmage yards, 17 touchdowns, and this year, a bit of a down year, only 59 catches for 875 yards and 8 touchdowns. Also had 3 carries for 33 yards. But we know what his capabilities are. He has shown elite athleticism and great deep speed. He has great change of direction, cut ability, some of the best hands in this draft. And in my opinion, he's the best route runner in this class. I think he is an amazing ability to play in the slot, and I think that's where he's going to fit in the Seahawks offense, especially with 2 barn burners in Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf on the outside. So moving on to cons, like I said, he's probably going to end up only being a slot receiver at the next level. He's very slight of build. He's 6 foot 175. His size might be of concern to some. It's very similar to the player who I'm going to compare him to in this draft. He reminds me a lot of Devonta Smith. Other cons, he did have a down year from his 2021 season, which was absolutely insane at Pittsburgh when Kenny Pickett was throwing him the ball. Also very rarely faced press man coverage in college, just due to the offensive schemes that ended up getting ran by Lincoln Riley at USC. So interesting to see how he'll react to that, but I think his role is going to be as a slot receiver at the next level, and I think he will fit in perfectly with DK and Lockett at the next level. Also, even though they're not going to move on from Lockett this offseason, maybe not even next season, but Lockett is starting to get up there in age. I don't see them signing him to another contract, so maybe a couple years down the line, you have your Tyler Lockett receiver or your Tyler Lockett replacement already in the building. All right. So that is pick number 2. So moving on to our third pick of the day, pick 37. We are sticking. I think we're sticking on the offensive side of the ball. Yes, we are. We are going out and filling a position of need that me and so many other Seahawks fans have been clamoring for a while, especially since the dreaded day when we took D. Eskridge over Creed Humphrey in 2021, and I have never let people hear the end of it. So we are finally going out and we are going to address the continuous problem we have had at center and go and get, in my opinion, the best center in the draft. John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota. So tell me a little bit about John Michael Schmitz. 6'4", 307, 24 years old. He's a bit bigger than most centers. He has had an amazing career up until this season. This is his 5th season of college. Didn't allow a sack until this year. In 12 games, he had 767 snaps, allowed 5 hurries, 3 quarterback hits, and 2 sacks. He is just a stone wall. He's very impressive in his run game. He's a mauler in the run game, very intelligent on that offensive line. He's very tough. He's bigger than a center. He has a bigger frame than a lot of centers, and he's going to stonewall guys. It's fantastic to watch. Cons, with his bigger size, he's going to struggle a bit against speed rushers. While he is an absolute mauler in the run game, he's only just above average in pass protection. He is a little bit older. He's going to be 24 years old at the start of the 2023 season. But again, offensive linemen tend to play into their late 30s, even their 40s. So age, I don't think, is a massive issue here. Also, while he's very good at running in a straight line and putting people on their asses that way, but when you ask him to move laterally, it's not that great. So again, he's great for a power rushing scheme. I think he can do a good job in learning that move blocking scheme, but he has a little bit of work to do. He's not a fully polished prospect, but I think he is still the best center in this draft, and I think he would be a fantastic addition to that Seahawks offensive line. Moving on to our next pick. We are going back to the defensive side of the ball at pick 52. The Seattle Seahawks take Keanu Benton, nose tackle out of Wisconsin. Now, tell me a little bit about Keanu Benton. 6'4", 312 pounds. He's only going to be 22 years old at the start of the 2023 season, and he has been on a meteoric rise over the past month or so. Up until a few weeks ago, I and several others had him rated as a mid-day 3 pick. Kind of a bit raw, not a very explosive player, but he had a fantastic Senior Bowl, one-on-ones and during the game. So we're going to see a lot more mocks of him going on day 2, and I think Seattle should absolutely be on that train. 2022, 36 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, and 2 passes defensed. He is a bruiser. He has a lot of power in that frame, and he has great technique, which allows him to get great leverage on a lot of these offensive linemen. He's also got really good length, really good wingspan, great run stuffer, which is something we desperately need this year. I'd say even more than getting interior pass rush, we desperately need a better run defense. He's also very intelligent, very great student of the game, very high football IQ. Cons, like I said before, he is a run stuffer. He's not going to get out there and be like blowing up guys like Jason Kelsey. He's not going to blow up a Zach Martin. That's not him. He's a run stopper. That is his big thing. His player comparison that I've seen going around, Perrion Winfrey, I think that's a pretty decent comparison. At 312, he might seem a little light for a nose tackle, but he can definitely put on the weight necessary to be a true one tech, or a one tech and a 3-4. So great pick, Keanu Benson at 52. Next up, our third round pick 83. We are going to go out and help out some of our linebacker depth. We are going to go and get one of my, hold up, give me a second. If you haven't tell, I am an Iowa fan. So we are going to go out and get Jack Campbell, linebacker from Iowa. Jack Campbell, if there's one word I could use to describe Jack Campbell, he is a leader. First and foremost, he is a leader. He is the captain of that Iowa defense. Even though their offense was terrible, their defense lights out, and Jack Campbell was a big reason for that. So his 2022 stats, 125 tackles. He is a tackling machine. 5.5 tackles for loss, a sack, a forced fumble, 2 interceptions. He's got great size for the position. He's 6'5", 246 pounds. He's very aggressive, very physical. He is not afraid to get up into you and hit you hard. Very good student of the game. He has great processing ability from that middle linebacker spot, and his pass rushing ability is actually pretty solid. I could see him getting used in a lot of blitzes. Cons, his coverage skills are meh. They're kind of subpar, and sometimes when he gets up into like offensive lineman, he struggles to get off of blocks. He is the perfect example of a high floor player who might not have a very high ceiling. He is just, for lack of a better word, he might not be flashy, but he just gets shit done. And that's what I love about him. So moving on, our fourth round pick 123, we are going into the defensive backfield, and we are getting some more DB help in the slot in our safety room in Jair Brown, safety out of Penn State. So what can you tell me here about Jair Brown? So Jair Brown, 5'11", 208 pounds, 23 years old. Only 5'11", plays like he's 6'5", man. He is an aggressive player from that backfield. And that shows up everywhere. Like, look at these stats that he put up for Penn State this last year. 74 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, 4 interceptions, 3 passes defense, 2 forced fumbles, and 1 of which was returned for a touchdown. His stat sheet blows a lot of defensive backs out of the water. And that's because he plays really aggressive. And that can be a blessing and a curse. So let's go over his pros. He's a really good tackler. He's a ball hawk. He gets after the ball. Not only is he great at batting the ball away and getting picks, he is great at punching those balls out, just like Kobe Bryant is. He's capable in run support, great at blowing up screens, and he can blitz. 4.5 sacks on the blitz. That's really good. Cons, with his aggressiveness, he got penalized a lot in college. So something he's going to have to work on. It might be just something you have to take with the good, but yeah. Sometimes his aggressiveness is going to get him flagged a bit. Sometimes he tends to give up too much cushion in the passing game, which can be an issue, but not something that can't be unlearned. And he's kind of stiff. He's not great at getting off the ball. He doesn't have elite speed, not elite movement skills. He is just a bruiser in the secondary. So yeah, fantastic pickup for the Seahawks here in the 4th round, I think. Next up, pick 153. I mentioned we re-signed Geno, but we didn't get Drew Lock, so we are going to go out and get a potential high-end backup behind Geno Smith and development piece, Jake Haener, quarterback out of Fresno State. So Jake Haener, a little short for a quarterback. He's 6 foot, 208 pounds, 24 years old, had a pretty decent season here, a very efficient season for Fresno State, 72 completion percentage of 72%, 2,896 yards through 20 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. He's got good arm strength, not great arm strength. He has a very high football IQ. He has an ability to scramble. He's not super mobile, but can scramble a little bit. Good quick release of the ball, good mechanics, and he's fairly accurate in the short to intermediate game. Unfortunately, the cons, just like a lot of undersized quarterbacks, he's below average, doesn't have great athleticism to make up for it. It's not like Russell Wilson. Does have some injury concerns. He missed multiple games in his career with injury, and that could very much lead to some issues down the road. Yeah. My player comparison, Taylor Heineke, makes a lot of sense. I think he is a high-end backup, but not a long-term starter. I think that he could make a lot of improvements with a really good offensive mind that Seattle has in Shane Waldron. But again, I don't see him as anything more than a high-end backup, which we still need. Moving on, pick 156, I have us taking Jalen Redmond, defensive tackle out of Oklahoma. Just like last year when I said we needed to come out of that draft with 2 edge rushers, we need to come out of this draft with 2 defensive tackles, 2 defensive linemen. So we got Keanu Benson, we got Tyree Wilson, who has that inside-outside flexibility, and Jalen Redmond is another inside guy. 6'3", 293 pounds, 24 years old at the start of the 2023 season. 2022 stat sheet isn't anything to write home about. 23 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 4 passes defense. He's a really high motor. He's really good against the run, and he's able to set the edge well, something that our defensive line didn't do very well last year. He's also surprisingly agile for his size, and you can see that in his get-off on pass rushing downs. Cons are he is so eager to get into the backfield and gets the quarterback at times that he forgets or he just abandons his run responsibilities and trying to get after the quarterback. He doesn't have amazing athleticism, so he's not very if you get him one-on-one, he's not very dangerous. He's not an every down player. He's probably a guy who you bring in on first and second down, you bring him in on run plays. I don't see him being on the field very often. I don't see him being on the field in critical situations, but a good depth signing, good depth pick for Seattle. Player comparison, Byron Cowart, defensive tackle for the Colts back in 2019. Very similar. And then last but not least, I have us shoring up our defensive backroom yet again with Darrell Luter Jr., corner from South Alabama. Now, with Pete's ability to just really develop like late round corner and defensive back talent, I think Darrell Luter is going to turn into a star. I mean, look at what Tariq Woolen did this past year. Everybody thought he's not going to start this year. He's too raw. He's only been playing corner for 2 years, and he is a defensive rookie of the year candidate. Tied for the league lead in interceptions with 6. Like, it's just amazing. It's like you can't teach athleticism. So let's get into Darrell Luter. 5 foot 11 and a half inches, 191 pounds. He'll be 23 at the start of the 2023 season. Excuse me. Again, 2022 stat sheet, nothing to write home about. 42 tackles, half a tackle for loss, 7 passes defensed, 1 interception. Very good ball skills. You see him getting his hand, even if it's not getting an interception, he's getting his hand on the ball very consistently for South Alabama. He's got good length and athleticism, good balance, able to mirror receivers very well. Main downside, he's not very physical. He's going to try and like mirror guys, but when you put him up against like bigger receivers, he struggles a bit. So yeah. Doesn't have elite recovery speed. It's not like Tariq Woolen, who is going to like you think that his receiver is wide open and then he just closes with that 4.26 speed and then punches the ball away. He's not going to do that. Also underpowered in run support, needs to get better at tackling, needs to get better getting off of blocks and defending in run support. But again, good defensive back development piece for the Seattle defense. Feels a good depth role, I think. And with that concludes our our first mock draft, and I decided to include a 53-man roster prediction based off of this draft. So, quarterback, I have Geno Smith being your starter, with Jake Haener being his backup. I have K9 being your starting running back, with Rashad Penny being the RB2, DJ Dallas and Godwin Igwebuike backing him up, with both of them being used on kick returns and punt returns. Wide receiver, we got DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Jordan Addison, with Marquise Goodwin, Derek Young, and Cade Johnson backing him up. No changes to tight ends. Noah Fant, Will Dissly, Colby Parkinson are going to be your tight ends. Offensive line, no changes at left tackle, left guard, or right tackle. John Michael Schmitz is going to be your starting center, with Austin Blythe backing him up. And then Ben Powers is going to be your starting right guard, with Phil Haynes backing him up. Moving on to defense and specialists, Keanu Benson will be your starting nose tackle, with Jonathan Hankins backing him up. Deron Payne and Shelby Harris are going to be your starting defensive ends, with Tyree Wilson and Jalen Redmond backing him up. No changes to outside linebacker. Inside linebacker, Jordan Brooks will be injured. Probably will miss the start of the season, so Jack Campbell and Drew Tranquil will be your starting inside linebackers, with Tanner Muse and John Radigan backing them up. For the cornerback room, I don't really have any changes from this past season. Tariq Woolen and Mike Jackson are going to be your starting corners, with Trey Brown, Darrell Luter, and Isaiah Dunn backing them up. For the nickel corner room, Jair Brown and Kobe Bryant are going to be your slot corners. I have Jair Brown in front right now. It could be either of them, I think. It could very well be Kobe, just because of his familiarity with the system. And your safeties are going to be Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs, Ryan Neal, and Joey Blunt, with your specialists being Jason Myers, Michael Dixon, and Carson Tinker. And just like that, we are done with our off-season scenario series. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, this is just my opinion. This is one potential off-season scenario that could happen, and there are a ton of different ways that it could go, and we're going to see that here very soon. We got the Combine coming up here in about a week. Free agency will start up here in 3 weeks, and that's going to be very interesting to keep an eye on. And then the draft coming up here in just a little over 2 months now. Yeah, it's going to come up faster than you think. So yeah, I'm very excited for the draft. Very excited to see what Seattle goes here. And without further ado, we will go ahead and wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, go Hawks.